years ago, 7th Regiment of Cavalry rode out of Fort Abraham Lincoln in the Dakota Territory to the sounds of Gary Owen and the girl I left behind. 2 days later, Libby Custer wrote in her diary, "With the departure of my husband, I believe our last happy days in garrison are over, for I have a premonition of disaster such as I have never known before." 40 days later, that premonition is going to come true on that barren hillside here in Montana. Because on June 25th, 1876, down below us here on this river, about a mile south, is one of the largest encampments in the history of the Plains Indians. 900 lodges, 8,000 Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, Southern Cheyenne, and Arapaho Indians. Of that 8,000, 1,800 to 2,000 of them are warriors. Yet, on this horridly hot Sunday afternoon, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer and 647 troopers of the 7th United States Cavalry are going to attack that village. Which obviously begs the question, why, how, and what happened here on these hogbacks and these coulees above a river that the Lakota call the Greasy Grass? You know it as the Little Bighorn. Well, it depends on your background. Most of us, I would think, would consider ourselves Euro-Americans. So how did all this start? Well, how about May 15th, 1607? In Jamestown, Virginia. I always throw that in because I'm from Virginia. But it's true. It's true. From that point on, we pushed the First Nations across the Appalachians, across Tennessee, across the Mississippi River, into Oklahoma, into the Great Plains. And by the mid-1860s, many tribes were already on reservations. Because the United States had a policy called Manifest Destiny, the God-given right for those that have to rule over those who have not. But here's the question. Who makes that decision on who has and who has not? The European culture, quite naturally, wants to build on the land, use the land, dig in the land. Matter of fact, the people at Jamestown thought there was gold there and they were digging around. The Lakota have a completely different view of the land. Makoche, Kile, Waka. Makoche, Kile, Waka. The land is sacred. You don't sell it, you don't buy it, you don't dig on it, because your ancestors lived on it. So perhaps it was inevitable that these two cultures are going to clash. 500 treaties made, 500 treaties broken. The treaty that's going to cause this is the Treaty of 1868, what we call the Fort Laramie Treaty. It established the Great Sioux Reservation of the Dakotas, which would cover today all of eastern South Dakota and the Black Hills. And this treaty said that the Lakota could live in the Black Hills unmolested forever. And it said that no white man could enter the Black Hills, ever. And as soon as the ink was dry, people started moving into the Dakotas. Now, not immediately, and they certainly didn't move into the Black Hills immediately. But you could see the migration starting. Where are they coming from? Mostly they're coming from the south. Because several years earlier, there was a big war back east. What we commonly refer to in Virginia as the Late Unpleasantness. You probably consider it called the Civil War. And a lot of people had nothing. So they left for new lands. And the country had to expand and grant had to have a policy of expansion. Now, he initially did not want to engage with the First Nation families. He wanted to put them on reservations, Christianize them, and teach them English. But he didn't want to annihilate them. And he certainly didn't want to go to war with them initially. But as things got worse in the country and we sank into a depression, he needed to move west. And to do that, his advisors told him, among those General Sheridan and Secretary Chandler, told him, you must sweep the Indians from the plains. Well, in 1874, they sent an expedition into the Black Hills, an army expedition. Now remember what the treaty said. No white people allowed in Black Hills. You've got to read the fine print, except the U.S. Army. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer leads this expedition, and he finds gold. And I'll make it real simple. It's just as simple as that. That one word is all that the Eastern newspapers needed. And pretty soon you had prospectors, people wanting to build towns. They're coming into the Dakotas. They're coming into the Black Hills, and the Lakota exact reprisals on them. And now Grant has a real problem. What does he do? Does he protect the treaty rights and keep everybody out of the Black Hills? Stop expansion? Or does he ignore the treaty and protect the white settlers? Well, I think you know what he intends to do. And he unilaterally declares war on the Plains Indians. And he puts together a campaign among whose planners are William Tecumseh Sherman and Little Philip Sheridan. Ladies and gentlemen, these two officers burnt down the state that I live in. They understand what total war is. And they're going to bring it to the Plains Indians. And not just by fighting the Indians, but by killing their infrastructure. What is the infrastructure? The buffalo. So it's not just white traders that kill the buffalo, it's the army. And as far in this campaign, killing buffalo is the equivalent of burning Atlanta. You have destroyed the infrastructure and the culture of the Lakota. Well, he declares war, he plans his campaign, and the campaign is fairly simple. All of the First Nation tribes that are out here and they're not going on to the reservation, they get an ultimatum. The ultimatum says that by January 31st, 1876, if you are not on the reservation, you will be considered hostile, and the army will take care of you. Well, they ignored the ultimatum. It was wintertime. Very few of the villages moved, and those that did didn't understand, and those that did understand didn't care. They weren't going to go back to the reservation. So they stayed out. And the army, in the spring of 1876, put their campaign into effect. Three-pronged attack. General Crook was going to come up from the south, General Terry and the 7th Cavalry from the east and Fort Abraham Lincoln, and Colonel John Gibbon from the west. And out here they were going to somehow find all these tribes, punish them, and put them back on the reservation. Now, it also is very important to understand who thought what. Sheridan didn't care. Sheridan said, kill them all. I don't care. Just get them on the reservation. Terry and Custer, they didn't think like that. Matter of fact, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer thought very highly of Native Americans for the most part. But he did believe that they needed to be punished and put back on the reservation. And so did General Terry. So, the campaign goes haywire from the very beginning. General Crook is coming up from the south, and he is attacked by over 1,000 Sioux and Cheyenne warriors. Wait a minute. Let me read the tactics manual here. It says here that the Indians don't come out like that and fight the army, that they scatter. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the premise that this whole campaign is based on. It's not how many Indians are out there, it's can you gather them up before they scatter. Grant believed that, Sherman believed it, Sheridan believed it, Terry believed it, Custer believed it. That is the premise of this whole campaign. And Crook just got attacked by 1,000 warriors. And he had 1,300 men. Well, he has 9 casualties, 9 dead, several wounded, and he turns around and goes back. So 1/3 of your attack just went home. And not only that, he didn't tell anybody. He didn't tell Terry, hey, I just got attacked by all these warriors. They're not scattering, they're fighting. He didn't tell John Gibbon. John Gibbon has seen trails and villages and Indians, and he hadn't told anybody anything either. So General Terry doesn't know. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer doesn't know that they're fighting. They're not scattering. I know what you're thinking. George Armstrong Custer. Well, he's not what you learned in 8th grade history. Sorry, Ms. Horwitz. He is a competent cavalry officer. He's the best cavalry officer that comes out of that Yankee army. Naturally, they turn to him. He's bold, audacious. And so they've got their cavalry leader. But they don't know that the Indians are fighting. They think they're going to scatter. So on June 24th, way out there in those dark mountains you see out there, the Wolf Mountains, the 7th Cavalry arrives. Now, many people have heard, and there are a lot of myths about this battle, a lot of thoughts about it, and you've heard that Colonel Custer disobeyed his orders, that he just went on his own and disobeyed his orders. Not true. Sorry, Ms. North. I got Terry's orders right here. Isn't that amazing? Now, listen to these orders. If you don't believe me, you can look them up. It is impossible, this is Terry to Custer, it is impossible to give you definite orders. Okay? But you should conform to them. Here's the kicker. Unless you shall see sufficient reason to depart from them. Terry gave Lieutenant Colonel Custer free rein. He said, okay, yeah, I'd like you to do some of these things, but if you think the situation dictates, you do what you think is best. Now, as a cavalry officer, if my boss told me that, Gary Owen, we're going after somebody. And I'm sure that's what Custer thought. He's got free rein here. He's got no constraints on his orders. So he did not disobey his orders. The second kick on Custer is he didn't have a plan. He's out here wildcat. He did have a plan. And it was a sound plan. His plan was to hide the entire 7th Cavalry all day, June 25th, and attack at dawn on June 26th, after they had a chance to find the village, check out what the ground looked like. Not a bad plan. Not a bad plan. But all plans go awry in war, as we know. And so on June 24th, late in the night, Custer sends his scouts, his Crow and Arikara scouts under the command of Lieutenant Varnum, West Point, hard as nails. You want a scout platoon leader? He's the man. You want to find trouble? He'll find it. So he takes the scouts, and they ascend an area out there called the Crow's Nest. And they wait for the sun to come up on June 25th. And when the sun comes up, what they see is very disturbing. Out across the Little Bighorn Valley, smoke from 900 lodges. They immediately send word back to Custer. Custer comes up to see for himself, but he can't see it. He doesn't have to see it. He believes his scouts. So he goes back. Plan is still in place. Hide the regiment. Go out and scout this huge village. Attack on the morning of the 26th. But like I said, all plans change. He gets back. The regiment has now caught up with him. They're sitting down trying to get a little rest. His brother Tom and several other people come up and tell him we got a problem. The warriors have seen us. They know we're here. They've seen our trail. They've seen our morning campfires. They know we're here. Now here's the quiz, ladies and gentlemen. If that village knows that there's a large army unit out there, what's it going to do? Scatter. You get an A. They're going to scatter, right? That's the premise of the whole campaign. So now Custer changes his plan. He can't wait. He can't have them sit there for a day and let that village break up and go 14 ways into the wind. He's got to corral them now. So he gives the order to attack immediately. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's boots and saddles. The troopers mount. You can hear the creaking of the leather between their boots and their saddle. Can you hear it? You can hear the clanging of their tin cups against their carbine rifles. Can you hear it? And the 7th Cavalry moves out into the Valley of Death. At 12 o'clock noon on the 25th, Custer halts his command. Now, up to this point, he has done everything correct. And as of 12 noon on the 25th of June, knowing what George Custer knows, he's going to do exactly what any cavalry commander in his place would do. And he divides up his regiment. He's going to send Captain Benteen with 113 troopers out across the ridges to the south. Why? Because if this village is scattering, they're going to corral them in. Benteen doesn't much like this mission. He doesn't much like Custer. But he goes out on his mission anyway. Custer and Major Reno, 2nd Command of the 7th Cavalry, ride on. And then Reno gets his orders. With 140 men, you will cross the Little Bighorn River, come into the valley, find the village, which we believe is fleeing at this point. Charge into that village with everything you got. And I will support you. Very important point. I will support you. Reno has never fought Indians. His last combat was in the late Unpleasantness. He moves out. Well, we're going to leave George Custer for a minute. We're going to ride with Marcus Reno. He crosses the Little Bighorn River into the valley. The valley opens up in front of him. They ride down the valley until in the far distance they see what they can't even believe, which is the biggest village they've ever seen. And the big problem is, it's not scattering. They're coming after him. Most cavalry charges in either column of twos or fours. Instead, he puts his cavalry battalion on line across the valley. And they charge down the valley, and the closer they get, the bigger that village is, and the more warriors are pouring out of the village. He stops and halts his battalion, tells them to dismount, fight on foot. So they form a skirmish line across the valley floor, and they fire into the village. Warriors pour out after him. He cannot hold that valley floor. He's going to have to leave. So he does a very good job of pulling back out of that valley into the woods down there by the river. But he can't stay there very long either. because the warriors are now surrounding that timber, setting it on fire. Reno doesn't know what to do at this point. So he turns to Colonel Custer's scout, Bloody Knife, and he asks him what they're going to do. And before Bloody Knife can answer the question, his head's blown off. And all of Bloody Knife's brains and skull and blood splatter onto the face of Marcus Reno. Now, whether he was in command or not, I can assure you he lost control. He starts giving incoherent orders. Mount up, dismount, mount up, dismount. Finally, he yells, anyone that wants to live, follow me. And he takes off. And the people immediately around him hear that order. But half of the battalion does not hear the order. And they're still there. And they're looking like, guys? The warriors call it a buffalo chase. They chase down the troopers, beat them to death with clubs. Reno and what's left of his command are going to climb a bluff 5 miles south of here and dig in. Reno's out of control. He's no longer in control of his battalion. That's from statements of his own soldiers. The warriors, they've treed Reno up there. So now let's go find George Custer. All during this time, remember, Custer was supposed to come and support Reno. Well, Custer saw Reno when he deployed across the valley floor. And I'm sure he thought, okay, good. Warriors are coming. He's blocked them. Now I'm going to take the rest of the regiment and attack the village, which is what Custer thought he was going to do. Well, Custer's going to arrive out here. Now you're going to have to stay with me. I want you to look to my front right, way out there. You're going to see those Wolf Mountains that are dark blue. Just on this side, you'll see a flat plateau and the little dip in a hill. Do you see that? Matter of fact, just below it, you see cars going across. That's called Weir Point. Custer arrives out at Weir Point, and for the first time, he sees the village. For the first time. Now, ladies and gentlemen, up to this point, he's done everything right. And from now on, he's going to do everything wrong. Because now is where I blame George Custer. Because this is where he signs his death warrant and the death warrant for 211 troopers. Knowing how big that village is, and knowing that he only has 211 troopers, 5 companies, he's going to split them up. Not good. Custer's going to descend down from Weir Point into where the valley opens up, called Medicine Tail Coulee. And the regiment's there are a couple of theories about what happens there. One is that Custer sends 2 companies down to try and cross the river. The other is that the entire regiment, 5 companies, go down to the river. Either way, nobody crosses the river. And the idea is to draw Indians away from Reno to him, and then go and try and attack the village. Now, how do you stop this fight? There's only really one way to stop it, and that is to capture all the women and children and hold them hostage. If you do that, the fight's over. But you got to get a hold of them first. And they're all running from 2 miles down to just below where we are now, along the river. They're all fleeing this way, away from the fight. So now Custer is going, with pressure from the Cheyenne and the Lakota, is going to come. Do you see that truck that's moving from our left to our right along that ridge line? They're all going to come up that ridge, Greasy Grass Ridge. And they're going to reunite up there. They're going to meet the next senior officer in the regiment, one of the most well-liked officers of the regiment, Captain Miles Keogh. And he's an Irishman, don't you know? And they're going to reunite up there. Now Custer is going to leave Keogh with 3 companies up on that ridge line. He is going to ride way down here behind us way behind the cemetery, down to where you got off the interstate when you came in here today. Why is he riding down there? Because he's going to cross the little bighorn there, and he's going to capture all these women and children that are fleeing that way. And he's going to hold them hostage, and the fight's over. So he's leaving 3 companies to protect his rear, if you will. What he doesn't know is that those 3 companies, all separated, are going to be defeated in detail. And that's the whole thing about this battle. You know, every little group is defeated in detail. Small groups, not one big group. They're all small little groups. And they're outnumbered 10 to 1. And the warriors creep up the ridge line there. They don't swarm them with horses. They creep up. Matter of fact, in their own words, they call it a day of deliberate killing. They creep up and they kill the soldiers one by one who are silhouetted against the sky like those cars are on that ridge line right now. And once the soldiers stop firing, then they swarmed over them. And they swarm over, if you look straight out to where we are, well, start at the monument. Go right all along the ridge line, follow the cars. There's a car up there right now. You'll see a hill with 3 bushes and a car is right there. See it? Okay, that's Calhoun Hill. Custer's brother-in-law, Jimmy Calhoun, commands there, but not for long. The warriors come up there, they sweep over Calhoun's command, and they kill them all. Graveyard dead. Every one of them. And in the next company, which is on the far side of the ridge, they don't even know the warriors are coming. They're reserved. They're not in a skirmish formation. They're just back there holding horses. And the warriors swarm over that ridge line and kill them all. Graveyard dead. Some of them start running this way. And when you drive down the ridge line, if you look off to your left, you'll see the little white markers. And you can see how they tried to flee toward this area up here. And while this is going on, Custer's trying to cross, and he can't cross because there's too many Cheyenne dog soldiers down there. So now he's going to come back across where the National Cemetery is, right down here below us, literally right down below us here. He thinks Keogh and the 3 companies are still there, but they're dead. He comes up to Last Stand Hill, to the high ground, always the high ground. Plants his guidons. Why? So Benteen will see them. Benteen, remember Benteen? Whatever happened to Benteen? Well, he arrived out to where Major Reno was and never left. He had orders in his pocket from Custer. Benteen, big village, come quick, bring packs. He tells Reno that. Reno says, for God's sakes, you got to stay here. And he does. And that guidon is going to flutter. And nobody's going to answer it. Custer assembles his command up there, planting the guidons, thinking Benteen's going to show up. He never will. The warriors creep up along these little ridge lines, firing into the soldiers. They shoot their horses to barricade themselves. How do you barricade yourself against arching arrows? Very difficult. And they fight on. Now, you will have heard in your history books that probably these guys up there took their pistols out and killed themselves. No, they didn't. Warrior accounts tell us, and archaeology tells us, that these guys fought harder than anybody ever fought. The warrior accounts will even tell you that. Now, did some of that go on? Yes, I'll make a case for it. As you drive along Calhoun Ridge and look way down into the valley, you can't see it from here. You're going to see one lonely white marker. One of these white markers, all by itself down there. Now close your eyes for a minute. Go on, come on. Got to play the game. Imagine that you're a young 17-year-old Irish immigrant who joined the cavalry for an adventure. And you're all by yourself now. There are no bugle calls. And there are no friends. There's only smoke and the wild calls of the warriors around you. Do you take out your pistol? Do you put it against your head? Pull the trigger? Maybe. Probably. But not these men up here. They fight to the death. Warriors tell us that. It's over in about 15 minutes. The whole time, from the time Custer sees the village to the time this is over, is probably less than an hour. Now, although this fight is over, the fight 5 miles from here where Reno and Benteen are will go on all day, rest of the day the 25th, all night the 25th, all day the 26th, and into the night the 26th. And forever, whatever you think of Benteen, good, bad, indifferent, should have been court-martialed, shot, given the Congressional Medal of Honor, I don't care. Whatever you think of Benteen, he saves the life of 350 troopers out there. They will survive this battle. And 2 days later, they will come up on this hill, and they will see the floated, dead bodies of all their friends and most of the officers of the regiment. You know, there's an old Native American saying. It says, listen to the wind. It talks. Listen to the silence. It speaks. Listen to your heart. It knows. And all the great chiefs, Crazy Horse, Gall, Sitting Bull, they all knew what this meant. They knew what retribution was going to come from this. And they were right. Because for 15 years, the Army will hunt down and kill and put on reservations the Cheyenne, the Lakota, the Nez Perce, the Apaches, the Comanches, the Kiowas, you name it. And they will put them on reservations. And in 1891, the last high priest of the Ghost Dancers, Chief Kicking Bear, the last great Oglala Lakota chief, walks up to General Nelson Miles with a rifle in his hand. And he lays it at General Miles' feet. And he walks away. With that simple act, the Ghost Dancers, they faded into the mist. And that's the end of the greatest horse culture of the plains. Forever. Thank you for joining me today. I'll be available for questions if you have.